Waitress took off her apron and said, "You're not dying tonight. Mafia Boss." The rain was not merely falling, it was attacking Philadelphia, a percussive drumming against the steel roof of the Liberty Spoon diner. It sounded like a handful of dried peas rattling in a tin drum, a frantic rhythm against the 11 p.m. quiet. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, industrial bleach, and the weary end of a long shift. Maris Vega was counting the seconds until midnight. Her feet ached inside her sensible black shoes, a dull throb that radiated up her calves. She reached behind her back, her fingers finding the familiar knot of her apron strings. She was untying them when the man in the corner booth moved. He was the only customer left. Aside from two truckers arguing over sports replays on the muted television, this man had been silent, nursing the same black coffee for nearly an hour. He wore an immaculate suit, dark and expensive, and a face that seemed carved from old-world stone Italian, maybe Cuban, with an air of absolute stillness. Maris knew the type, even if she'd never served one. This neighborhood coughed up men who operated in silence. He raised the heavy porcelain cup for a final sip, and then he did not. The cup didn't shatter. It dropped from his suddenly lax fingers, landing upright on the formica table with a dull, heavy clack. The man, Ronan Viscari, though Maris did not know his name, pitched forward, a strangled sound, half gasp, half choke, escaped him. His hand flew to his throat, his knuckles white, his lips, pale just a moment before, were blooming into a terrible, bruised purple. Maris let the apron fall. It landed in a damp heap on the checkered linoleum. In that instant, she was no longer a waitress. She was the woman who had completed 3/4 of an EMT certification before her mother's medical bills had forced her to drop out. She moved. She didn't walk, she ran, weaving between the empty tables, ignoring the truckers who had finally looked up. "Call 911, she snapped, not looking back to see if they obeyed. She skidded to a halt at the booth. Ronan was lurching, his eyes wide and uncomprehending, the oxygen visibly fleeing his body. He was drowning on dry land. She grabbed the coffee cup, ignoring the residual heat, and sniffed, nothing but dark roast. Then she snatched the small, stainless steel creamer beside it. She waved it under her nose, a faint, sickeningly sweet odor. Bitter almonds. The words flashed in her mind, bright and terrible. Pulled from a textbook 3 years gone. Cyanide. "He's poisoned!" she yelled, mostly to herself. She vaulted over the back of the vinyl booth, landing hard on the seat beside him. He was starting to convulse. A silent, awful seizure. "Sir, can you hear me?" She didn't wait for an answer. She sprinted behind the counter, past the humming grill, and ripped the gray plastic emergency kit from the wall mount. Oxygen. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp. She pulled out the small green tank and the clear plastic mask, stretching the elastic band over his head, cranking the valve open. The hiss of air filled the diner. She grabbed the plastic squeeze bottle of activated charcoal. "Drink!" she commanded. Forcing the nozzle between his seizing teeth, he gagged, a horrific wet sound, and black liquid spilled from the corner of his mouth, staining his pristine white shirt. As she fought to keep him upright, forcing his body to accept the antidote, a movement at the back door caught her eye. Through the steam and the relentless rain beating on the glass, a figure just a shadow in a dark baseball cap pushed the panic bar and slipped out into the alley. He hadn't run. He had strolled. Fueled by an adrenaline she hadn't felt in years. Maris left Ronan choking on charcoal and ran to the diner's front door, slamming the heavy deadbolt into place. She lunged for the breaker panel and hit the kill switch for the back door's magnetic lock. It was too late to catch him, but the diner was secure. She returned to the booth. Ronan was still, but the violent purple was receding from his lips, replaced by the gray pallor of shock and the grotesque black smear of the charcoal. His eyes, sharp and terrifyingly clear, focused on her. They flicked down to her uniform, to the dark splash of poisoned coffee that had hit her when the cup fell. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline curdling into a cold fear. "You're not dying tonight, Mafia Boss," Maris whispered, the words tasting like acid on her tongue. It was half sarcasm, half desperate command. The wail of sirens was still distant, fighting the storm. Ronan Vascari didn't look relieved. He looked calculating. The front door rattled, a heavy fist hammering the glass. But it wasn't the police. A man built like a refrigerator, wearing an overcoat that probably cost more than Maris's car, pounded on the locked door. "Silas," Ronan rasped, his voice shredded by the poison and the charcoal. Maris, moving on autopilot, unlocked the deadbolt. The man, Silas Rowe, burst in, a handgun already visible in a shoulder holster under his arm. "Boss, he's down. Nico's down." Silas didn't look at Maris. He pointed through the rain-swept glass to the parking lot. "In the car. He's cold." Ronan used the table to haul himself to his feet, waving away Silas's help. Maris watched, a numb detachment setting in as the truth settled over her. The driver, taken out. Silas had already checked. A suppressed shot, clean and silent. They wanted poison in the diner. They wanted quiet. They hadn't counted on a waitress who knew the smell of almonds. A black SUV, a void in the stormy darkness, idled by the curb. Silas was half carrying Ronan toward it. "Get the tapes," Ronan ordered, his voice stronger now, pointing back at the diner's small security dome. "The hard drive." "No!" Maris said it before she could think. It was the stupidest thing she could have done. "That's property of the Liberty Spoon. You can't—" Ronan stopped, one hand on the SUV's door. He turned, the rain plastering his expensive black hair to his skull. He looked at her, really looked at her, his eyes assessing her like a threat. "You," he said, the word cutting through the storm. "Get in the car." "I'm not going anywhere. I called the police." "You are the only living witness," Ronan stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You saw the man in the cap. You saved my life. You are not a waitress anymore. You are a liability. Get in the car." Silas didn't ask twice. He crossed the space in 2 strides, grabbed her arm in a grip like a steel clamp, and half threw her into the back of the luxury SUV. The door slammed shut, the heavy lock engaging with a sickening thud. The truck smelled of rich leather and ozone. They peeled out, tires screaming on the wet asphalt. They didn't get 2 blocks. A rusted, heavy-duty pickup truck swerved from a dark alley, blocking the street, its high beams blinding them. "Contact," Silas yelled from the driver's seat. Maris reacted on pure instinct. In the back, by her feet, was a high-powered emergency flashlight. Beside it, a 20-pound bag of flour from the diner's delivery, which Silas must have thrown in when he bundled her out. She didn't think. She grabbed the heavy flashlight and smashed the rear side window, the tempered glass exploding outward. Then she ripped the paper bag of flour open. "Gun it!" she screamed at Silas. As he stomped on the accelerator, Maris hurled handfuls of flour out the broken window, into the air, creating a white cloud that drifted toward the pickup's engine block. The truck revved, and the fine powder in the air met the heat of the engine. It ignited in a blinding, coughing whoosh of white flame and smoke. A small, concussive pop that rocked their own vehicle. Silas didn't hesitate. He mounted the sidewalk, scraping sparks off a light pole, and rocketed past the disoriented pickup truck. They were safe, for now, speeding toward the highway. "We go back," Ronan said from the front passenger seat, coughing. "Burn the diner's hard drive." "You can't," Maris said again, her voice shaking as she pulled a shard of glass from her sleeve. "That place, it's all Mr. Henderson his insurance won't cover arson." "His insurance won't cover a Vascari problem," Ronan countered, his voice cold. "This is how we stay clean." That's not clean," Maris shot back, her fear turning to anger. "That's just moving the filth." The car went silent, the tension thick between the immigrant's daughter who respected a small business and the man who only respected survival. Silas tossed a melted piece of plastic onto the front console. Nico's phone. Found it in the lot. Mostly fried, but the SIM, it's there. He plugged the card into a reader built into the dash. An encrypted calendar lit up the screen. One appointment for tomorrow, Orchid Ledger. A blockchain accounting firm, Silas muttered, reading the profile. Smells like a front. Ronan Vescari turned slowly in his seat. His eyes were dark, the pupils still blown wide from the toxin. He looked at Maris, at her uniform stained with coffee, charcoal, and now rain. You owe me a life, he said. Maris met his gaze. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but something harder was underneath it. You owe me for the coffee, she said, her voice trembling but unbroken. And the truth. The lock on her Fishtown apartment was useless. The wood around the deadbolt splintered and kicked in. Maris froze on the landing, the smell of her own lavender soap hitting her, now mixed with something else, the metallic tang of violation. Silas went in first, weapon drawn, clearing the small space in seconds. Ronan followed, his movements still stiff from the poison, his face a mask of controlled anger. Maris stepped inside her home. It was not just messy, it was insulted. Cushions were slashed, their stuffing pulled out like entrails. Her small collection of EMT textbooks, the ones she studied after her shifts, were thrown against the wall, their spines broken. Her mattress was flipped, her meager possessions scattered. It was a violation intended to terrorize, not to steal. In the small bathroom, the mirror was intact, but a message was scrawled across the glass in her own, bright red lipstick. Helio? Helio, Maris whispered, her throat tight, the sight of the word hitting her harder than the destruction of her things. Ronan traced the letters on the glass, his expression darkening. Heliotrope, the heliotrope ring. He said it like a curse, something old and bitter. They move silent, digital. They prefer poison over bullets. It's run by a man named Lazaro Kincaid. You know him, she stated. It was not a question. He was my father's partner, Ronan said, his voice flat, turning away from the mirror. Until Kincaid decided technology was cleaner than shipping, he builds data forts, trades in secrets, and washes money for men who wear cleaner suits than I do. Orchid Ledger is his new cathedral. He missed this, Maris said, pointing to the kitchen counter. Her laptop was still there, untouched. It was too old, too cheap to steal, but the power light was blinking. An unread email sat in her inbox. Sender unknown, subject line blank. It had arrived 10 minutes ago. She opened it. The email contained a single, scanned document, a high-resolution receipt. Citywide Ethics Directorate, Maris read aloud, her voice tight with confusion. A donation for the Urban Transparency Project. Who are they? Silas, looking over her shoulder, grunted, CE'd. They don't exist. Not officially. It's a ghost company. A shell. They've been making noise in the press about cleaning up the ports, a new wave of integrity. An ethics directorate that takes anonymous donations, Ronan murmured, leaning in. It's protection. Kincaid isn't just washing money, he's buying the city's oversight. He's building a wall of legitimacy. The receipt was a forgery. Maris could see the digital artifacts around the logo, but the routing number at the bottom was very real, and it led directly to the name Silas had found Orchid Ledger. The email contained a second attachment, an invitation, a Night of Transparency gala, a fundraiser for the CEDD. Tonight. He's arrogant, Maris said, the pieces clicking into place. He sent this. He wants us to see it. He wants you to know he controls the agencies. He wants me to see it, Ronan corrected. He was announcing his victory. He didn't know about you. He looked at the gala details. Bellevue Hotel, in 3 hours. He turned to Maris, his dark eyes meeting hers. You still want the truth, it's in there. We can't just walk in. We can, Ronan said. He looked at her diner uniform, stained with charcoal and rain. But not like that. 2 hours later, Maris looked at herself in the mirror of a hotel room Ronan had secured. Her damp hair was twisted into an elegant knot. She wore a simple, sleeveless black dress Silas had produced from nowhere. It fit as if it were made for her. Ronan stood beside her, His suit changed, the poison and the night's violence erased from his appearance. He looked less like a victim and more like what he was, the man who owned the shadows. "You look nervous," he observed in the reflection. "I'm a waitress, not this. Tonight, you're the only person in the room I trust," he said. He offered his arm. "They'll be looking for a mafia boss and a witness. They won't be looking for a couple." Maris took his arm. His touch was warm, solid. It felt dangerously steady. The ballroom was a sea of champagne and false smiles. Men and women in expensive suits clapped politely as a man from the CED spoke at a sleek, modern podium. Maris felt out of place, her senses overwhelmed, but her training kicked in. She was not serving tables. She was scanning a room. She noticed the way the security guards favored their left side, where their holsters were. She noticed the CED speaker's habit of tapping his notes. And she noticed the podium. A small, black USB drive was plugged into the side, but it was plugged in wrong. The seam of the plastic casing was facing up, an amateur mistake, unless it was not a mistake. "Ronan," she whispered, her fingers tightening on his arm, "look at the podium." He followed her gaze. "It's upside down." "It's a data trap," she murmured, remembering a warning from an old tech blog. "It's not writing to the laptop, it's pulling from it. They're grabbing data from the speaker's own device while he talks." Ronan nodded, a flash of impressed respect in his eyes. "The speaker is about to start the charity auction. I'm going to win." "Win what?" "Something expensive, something loud." As the speaker transitioned, Ronan raised his bidder's paddle. "I will open the bidding at 50,000. Ronan's voice cut through the room. A collective gasp went up. Maris did not wait. As all eyes turned to the ridiculously high bid for a piece of modern art, she slipped away from his side. She moved as she did during a dinner rush, invisible, efficient. She walked behind the stage, into the small, dark tech room. It was empty, just a nest of wires and a soundboard. The podium's main hub was there. She saw the connection. The upside-down USB was linked to a hard drive humming softly beneath the table. She pulled an identical-looking drive from her small borrowed clutch one Silas had given her and counted 1, 2, 3. She swapped the drives. The light on the hub flashed red, then green. She was out. She grabbed the stolen drive and was back in the ballroom in under 40 seconds. They met near the exit, Ronan having intentionally lost the bid. "Got it," she breathed. As they moved toward the revolving doors, two men in dark blue windbreakers stepped in front of them. The patches on their shoulders read EPG, Eastern Port Authority, Task Group. "Mr. Vescari," the lead agent said, his hand resting near his sidearm. "Fancy seeing you here." Before Ronan could answer, Silas stepped between them, holding a cocktail napkin to his nose. "Sir, I think the valet scratched the car, and this champagne." He sniffed the napkin. "It smells like, sulfur." It was a blatant, ridiculous lie, but he said it with utter panic. Just then, a high-pitched alarm began to sound from the tech room Maris had just left. A pre-recorded voice announced, "Evacuate, evacuate, gas leak detected." Silas! He had triggered a false alarm. In the ensuing panic, the agents were pushed aside by the stampede of wealthy donors. Silas grabbed Maris and Ronan, shoving them through a service exit, into the kitchen and out into the loading bay. They were back in the SUV, speeding through the dark streets of Philadelphia. Maris clutched the stolen USB drive. It was warm. "We give this to the press," she said, her voice firm. "We expose them, the CED, Orchid Ledger, all of it." "No." Ronan's voice was final. He was checking his phone, his face grim. "You give that to the press, and you are dead by morning. So is the reporter. Kincaid does not just cut the head off the snake. He burns the whole garden. People who touch Orchid Ledger, they just stop existing." "So what?" Maris cried, the frustration and fear boiling over. "We just let them win. I thought you wanted the truth. That is not justice. That is just survival." "Justice is a luxury, Maris," Ronan shot back, turning to face her in the dark. "Survival is the job. I believe in leverage. You use this to find his weakness. You break him where he is strongest. You do not wave it around like a flag. I do not live in your world, she said, her voice dropping. I believe in the light. The light gets people killed, he said softly. A soft buzz interrupted the tense silence. It was Maris's phone. She looked at the screen. A new message. It was a picture. Her mother, sitting in her wheelchair by the window of her nursing home, a cup of tea on the table beside her, a clear, sharp photo, taken from the street, taken minutes ago. Below the photo, a single line of text and a set of coordinates. Give us the USB, or she learns what it is like to be truly alone. Maris's breath hitched. The USB in her hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Ronan saw her face change, saw the phone screen, his hand clamped down on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white, the leather groaning under the pressure. Kincaid just hit your home, Taz, he said, his voice a low, cold vibration of rage. Now he has us as an enemy. The black SUV cut through the pre-dawn gloom, leaving Philadelphia and its ghosts behind. Maris stared out the window. The image of the man in the baseball cap burned into her memory. Beside her. Ronan Vascari was silent, his stillness a heavy weight in the confined space. They didn't go to another safe house. They went to her mother's nursing home. Maris expected a clandestine, middle-of-the-night extraction, perhaps a tense argument with a night nurse. Instead, a luxury ambulance was already waiting. 2 people in crisp, dark suits too expensive for healthcare workers met them at the door. They flashed credentials that looked impossibly official. National Economic Security Bureau. NESB. Maris had never heard of it. Mrs. Vega is being transferred, the woman said, her voice devoid of emotion. She's been accepted into a private trial at St. Castor Hospice, all expenses covered by the Bureau's Community Health Initiative. It was a lie, a clean, efficient, terrifying lie. Maris watched, numb, as they wheeled her mother, sleeping peacefully from a sedative Maris hadn't authorized, into the waiting vehicle. Ronan had done this. He had moved her mother like a chess piece, wrapping her in a layer of fictional bureaucracy so thick that Kincaid's reach would, hopefully, be blunted. She's safe, Ronan said, standing beside her on the rain-slicked curb. Said, Castor is a fortress. Kincaid can't touch her there. Maris turned to him, her face pale with a cold fury. You didn't save her. You took her. You've wrapped her in your world. I moved her out of his, Ronan countered, his voice low and sharp. This is the only way to protect her. Not with ethics, with insulation. She hated it. She hated the feeling of being indebted, of being so completely manipulated. But the image of the photograph, her mother in a sniper's crosshairs, was sharper, more painful. She swallowed her pride, the taste metallic and bitter, and got back in the SUV. They drove south, crossing the Delaware Memorial Bridge as the sun bled gray light into the sky. Their destination was Port Providence, New Jersey, a gritty, wind-scarred town built on container shipping and quiet deals. It was the kind of place that smelled of low tide, diesel, and rust. It was the home of Orchid Ledger's primary data center. Silas, who had been driving in silence, finally spoke. The hub is a digital vault. Kincaid's firewalls are legendary. We need a key, and we don't have one. Then we get one, Ronan said. I know someone, Silas offered. Nix Calder. She's the best data thief on the East Coast. Platinum hair, an attitude like a bag of broken glass. She cracked your Belgrade account 3 years ago. Ronan's head turned slowly. The one who cost me $8 million. The same. She tried to go straight, running IT for some corporate firm. She's bored, and she owes me. They found Nix Calder in the back of a 24-hour electronics repair shop, surrounded by a fortress of salvaged monitors. She had hair like spun platinum, and eyes that seemed to be scanning 3 screens at once. Vascari, she said, not looking up, her fingers flying across a keyboard. You look worse than I remember. Heard you almost got taken out by a bad cup of coffee. Nix, Ronan said, his voice hard. Silas says you're looking for a challenge. I'm looking for a paycheck. I have something better. I have Lazaro Kincaid. Nix's fingers stopped. She swiveled in her chair, her gaze finally landing on Ronan. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. Kincaid, that's not a challenge. That's a final boss. I'm in, but it's going to cost you double. They secured a safe house in a dismal apartment complex overlooking the shipyard, the rhythmic clang of containers providing a constant, unnerving soundtrack. For 48 hours, Maris was transformed. She was no longer a waitress. She was Ronan's new executive assistant, a role she had to learn to inhabit down to the bone. Ronan was a relentless teacher. He didn't teach her to shoot. He taught her to observe. Kincaid's people aren't street thugs. They're analysts. They look for anomalies, he said, pacing the small living room. You don't walk into a room, you assess it. Where are the cameras? Who is watching the door? Who isn't watching the door? He made her study footage of the Orchid Ledger lobby. Watch the head of security. He drinks the same brand of tea every day at 3:15. His replacement is sloppy. He checks his phone every 2 minutes. The administrator at the front desk. Listen to her breathing. It's shallow. She's afraid of her boss. Maris absorbed it all. Her mind trained to remember complex orders and the allergies of 30 different customers, soaking in the new data. She was good at it. She knew how to read people, how to anticipate their needs, how to become invisible. On the third night, Ronan paused their training. The room was quiet, save for the hum of Nix's servers in the next room. I can stop this, he said, his voice unexpectedly soft. I can give you and your mother new identities. A house on a quiet island, enough money to live comfortably forever. You would be free of Kincaid and free of me. Maris looked at him. It was a test, an escape hatch. She thought of the diner, of the smell of bitter almonds, of the red lipstick scrawled on her mirror. She thought of the cold, sick feeling of helplessness when she saw the photo of her mother. I don't run from a kitchen fire. Ronan, she said, her voice steady. I don't walk away when the grill explodes. I find the extinguisher. I put the fire out. A flicker of something respect. Surprise passed through Ronan's dark eyes. He nodded. Once. Fine. Then we put this out. The breakthrough came from Nix. He's not just washing money, she announced, spinning in her chair. He's converting it. She brought up a complex diagram on her main screen. Orchid Ledger isn't just an accounting firm, it's a logistics hub. Every time a large crypto transaction clears, a corresponding container moves from a depot in Delaware. She pointed to a satellite image of a massive, secure lot. Virtual money becomes real goods. Power, he's moving weapons. Restricted tech, maybe people. He's built a supply chain fueled by digital ghosts. He's hosting a tech gala tomorrow night, Silas added, reading from another screen. At the Port Providence headquarters, the future of secure shipping. It's the perfect cover, all his top people will be there. The plan clicked into place, born of necessity. He'll be distracted, Ronan said. Maris and I will attend the gala. We'll be the distraction. We give him a problem to look at. While we're the solution, Silas finished, looking at Nix. We hit the server room. We use the data Maris grabbed from the CED, find the link to the Delaware depot, and cut the head off the snake. It was just before dawn, hours before the operation. The apartment was tense. Maris was making coffee. The familiar ritual a small comfort. Ronan stood by the window, watching the massive cranes moving against the gray sky. He saved my life once, Ronan said, so quietly Maris almost didn't hear him. She stopped, the hot water halfway through the filter. Kincaid, years ago, before heliotrope. He didn't turn around. I was arrogant, trying to prove myself to my father. I ran a shipment of electronics up the coast against a storm warning. The boat was breaking up. My crew was gone. The Coast Guard wasn't coming. He paused, the memory hanging heavy in the air. Lazaro Kincaid heard the distress call. He was running a rival crew then. He pulled me out of the water himself. He lost his own cargo to do it. Why are you telling me this? Maris asked, bringing him a cup. Ronan finally turned. Taking the mug, His fingers brushed hers, a brief, static shock. "Because tonight, I'm going to destroy him. This isn't just about the poison. This is about an old debt. He saved my life, but he used that debt to try and take everything my family built. This war is old. It's personal." Maris looked at him, this dangerous, complicated man, bound by a code of violence and honor she couldn't possibly understand. He was a criminal. He was also the only one who hadn't lied to her about who he was. She looked at the stolen USB in her hand, the proof against the ethical agencies that were just another arm of the monster. The line between the liars and the killers had dissolved, and she was standing on the side of the killer. The Orchid Ledger headquarters was a monument to cold, new money, all glass, brushed steel, and uncomfortable art. It buzzed with the self-importance of the tech elite. Maris moved through the crowd, not as a waitress, but as an accessory. She wore a severe, minimalist black jumpsuit, her hair pulled back so tightly it almost hurt. On her arm was Ronan Vascari, transformed into the very picture of a disgruntled Silicon Valley investor, complaining loudly about the poor quality of the champagne. Their target was a restricted corridor behind the main presentation hall. The Network Operations Center, Nix had called it, the brain. Maris approached the security checkpoint, not with a weapon, but with a golden retriever wearing a blue therapy vest. She was leading him by the leash. The guard, a thick-necked man named Barlow according to his badge, put up a hand. "Ma'am, restricted area." "I know, I'm so sorry," Maris said, her voice pitched with practiced corporate anxiety. "Mr. Kincaid personally requested Barnaby. He said the stress of the launch was getting to the tech team. Employee wellness. I think he called it." Barlow looked at the dog, who sat and panted amiably. He grunted. It was exactly the kind of absurd perk a tech billionaire would approve. He swiped his MasterCard key and the reinforced door hissed open. 5 minutes, then the dog goes. "Thank you. You're a lifesaver." Maris led Barnaby inside. The dog was a rental, perfectly trained, tucked beneath his thick collar, disguised as a tracker, was a high-speed card cloner. As she passed the guard station, Maris leaned in, letting Barnaby nuzzle the guard's hand. "He likes you." In that brief moment, she pressed the dog's collar against the card key still hanging from Barlow's belt, a tiny, imperceptible vibration. The cloner had the master key. The server room was cold, a canyon of black, humming towers. Only one person was inside, sitting at the main console, her back to the door. At that exact moment, 20 blocks away, Nix Calder initiated the solar flare storm. She unleashed a torrent of junk data at Orchid's external servers, a digital tidal wave that mimicked a catastrophic network failure. In the server room, alarms flashed red on the administrator's screen. The woman's hands flew across her keyboard. Maris watched as the system, overwhelmed, automatically shunted into internal maintenance mode, disconnecting from the outside grid. Above them, in the air ducts, Silas Rowe crawled, balanced on a narrow beam. He located the primary junction for the fire suppression system. He didn't disable it. He rerouted the trigger, connecting it to a small transmitter. If he pressed the button, the CO2 system would activate, flooding the exits with nitrogen and locking every door in the corridor, a cage of their own making. "Excuse me," Maris said. The woman at the console jumped, spinning around. She was young, with wide, terrified eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, her hands came up, quick and sharp, fingers flying in a flurry of motion. "You are not supposed to be in here." Maris's breath caught. It was ASL, American Sign Language. She knew it from her community nutrition courses, from the clinics. She signed back, slowly, "I am here to help. My name is Maris." The woman's name was Talia. She was the chief administrator, and she was trapped. Talia signed, her movements frantic, pointing to a small, hidden camera in the corner. "He watches. Kincaid, he has my brother. If I make a mistake..." Maris understood. This wasn't a job for Talia. It was a prison. I can get your brother out, Maris said, speaking and signing simultaneously, projecting confidence she didn't feel. She held up the cloned card key. But I need the data from the CED gala, the drive I gave you. Talia paled. She had been the one to receive the drive, to upload Kincaid's trap. Talia, Maris signed, her hands firm. He will never let you go. This is your one chance. She offered a choice, not a threat. Freedom for you, data for me. Talia hesitated, her gaze flicking from Maris to the camera. She took a deep breath, her hands moved. What do you need? In the ductwork. Silas heard a new sound. Footsteps, heavy, measured, security, coming for a manual check. He pressed the button. A loud, pressurized hiss filled the hallway. Red lights bathed the corridor as the automated voice announced a fire alert. Heavy magnetic locks slammed shut. In the server room, Talia's console lit up with the same alarm. It's a fake, Maris said quickly. My man bought us time. The safe. Where is the gala data? Talia pointed to a floor safe hidden beneath a panel. Silas dropped from the ceiling vent, landing silently. That's my cue. He had the safe open in under a minute, his tools a blur. He pulled out a stack of hard drives, CED transfers, ePayG payments, and... He held up a drive, Delaware shipping manifests, a container, Larkspur Dawn, scheduled to move tonight, midnight. The door to the server room suddenly shuddered. A heavy fist pounded on it. Barlow, open this door, now. They were trapped by their own device. The manual override, Talia signed, pointing to a panel. No, Ronan's voice said, appearing from the opposite hallway, a service corridor. Go, now. He had bypassed the lockdown. He nodded to Silas. Get them out. Get the data clear. As Maris, Talia, and Silas ran for the service exit, the main server door finally burst open. 2 internal security men, Kincaid's personal guard, spilled in. They were not corporate security, they were soldiers. They saw Ronan. He was unarmed, standing between them and the escaping group. Ronan didn't wait. He moved, not with the brawl of a street fighter, but with the brutal economy of a professional. He deflected the first man's punch, using the man's own momentum to drive his elbow into his solar plexus. The guard collapsed, the air driven from his lungs. The second man grabbed Ronan from behind, a chokehold. Ronan dropped his weight, stomped his heel onto the guard's instep, breaking it. As the man screamed and his grip loosened, Ronan spun. A short, hard palm strike to the nose. It was not lethal. It was not vicious. It was just... over... It took less than 5 seconds. He bought them the time they needed. They regrouped in the SUV, speeding away from Port Providence, Barnaby the dog panting happily in the back. Nix was already tearing through the data on her laptop. I'm in, Nix said, her voice tight. The manifests are here, the transfers. It's all here. It's beautiful. Then she stopped. Her face went pale. Oh, no. What? Maris asked, her heart pounding. It's a trap, not the alarm, the data. Nix pointed to a line of code buried deep in the manifest. It's a dead man's switch. The second I copied this drive, I started a clock. Kincaid knew someone would get in. He wanted us to. How long? Ronan asked, his voice dangerously calm as he dabbed a trickle of blood from his lip. Nix looked at the countdown timer on her screen. 60 minutes, in exactly 60 minutes, this drive, the data in the Delaware depot, and the original files at Orchid. All of it self-destructs, wiped clean by a thermite charge linked to the server. The clock was ticking. Silas, Ronan commanded. Get us to the Delaware port now. Maris looked at the timer. 59 minutes and counting. They didn't just have to get the proof. They had to win a race against Kincaid's fire. They didn't make it to the Delaware port. Not directly. With security at Orchid Ledger locking down the city, a direct approach was suicide. Silas drove them into the oldest, most forgotten part of South Philly, killing the headlights as he swerved into the cavernous, rotting shell of an abandoned boatyard. The rain hammered the corrugated tin roof, a deafening roar that masked their arrival. The timer on Nix's laptop screen read 41 minutes. Inside, The air was thick with the smell of damp wood, old rope, and river water. A single utility light flickered on a long extension cord, casting spastic, dancing shadows over the skeletons of half-finished boats. It was cold, but the ancient brick walls held a faint, residual warmth, a memory of human activity. "We move in 20, Ronan said, his voice tight as he shrugged off his jacket. "Nix. Find a way past their perimeter. Silas, prep the gear." Maris watched him step into the weak light. The fight at the gala, though short, had been brutal. His knuckles were raw, scraped open on the guard's teeth or gear. "You're bleeding," she said. He glanced at his hand, indifferent. "It's nothing. It'll get infected." She grabbed the emergency kit from the SUV, the same one she'd used in the diner what felt like a lifetime ago. She pulled out an antiseptic wipe and a roll of gauze. "Give me your hand." He hesitated, then relented. He sat on an overturned crate, his back to the flickering light. She took his hand. It was steady, calloused and large. She cleaned the scrapes, her touch professional and sure, her focus absolute. The din of the rain outside seemed to fade, creating a strange, intimate pocket of silence around them. Ronan watched her face, the serious set of her brow, the way she bit her lip in concentration. A sound rumbled in his chest, dry and unused, a laugh. It was short, but it was real. "What?" she asked, not looking up. "You," he said, his voice rough. "You're the most dangerous person I've met in a decade." He paused. "When I was a kid, maybe 16, I had a job delivering pizzas in this neighborhood. There was a church, St. Dominic's. They had a bingo night every Friday. Ordered 20 pies, I'd carry them in, stack them on the table. The priest would pay me. Then he'd tell me to use the service entrance to leave. Said I wasn't suitable for the main hall." Maris looked up, her fingers still resting on his hand. "Because of your family. Because I was a Viscari, I was good enough to feed them, but not good enough to be seen by them." He looked at her, his eyes dark. "You're the opposite. You walk right into the main hall. You serve them the poison antidote." That's not justice. Ronan, that's just triage," she said softly, wrapping the gauze. "You talk about Kincaid, about your father. This isn't just business for you, it's revenge." "He drew first blood," Ronan said. "And where does it end?" she challenged him, meeting his gaze. "Where is the line between protecting your family and possessing everyone who gets close to you? Where does justice stop and revenge begin?" He didn't answer. The rain beat a frantic rhythm on the roof. The 30-minute mark on the laptop was fast approaching. The air between them was electric, charged with the debate, with the exhaustion, with the undeniable gravitational pull that had been humming between them since the diner. They were two live wires in a storm. He didn't move his hand from hers. Instead, he slowly raised his other hand, the uninjured one, and brushed his thumb over her cheekbone. Her skin was damp from the rain. She didn't pull away. "You're right," he whispered. "I don't know where the line is anymore. I only know what side of it he's on." He leaned in, not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead against hers. They stayed there for a single, shared breath, the world reduced to the scratch of her gauze and the sound of the rain. His eyes were closed. When he opened them, they were looking directly into hers. He lifted his chin, and then his lips were on hers. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of a thriller. It was slow. It was certain. It was a question, "Are you here?" and her lips softening under his were the answer, "I am." It was a deep, searing kiss that spoke of control finally, willingly, lost. Maris's hand, the one that wasn't holding his, came up, her fingers tangling in the damp hair at the nape of his neck. She didn't just receive the kiss. She answered it, pulling him closer, a silent demand. Their damp clothes clung to their skin, the chill of the boatyard forgotten, replaced by a desperate, rising heat. His hand slid from her cheek to her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her throat. She shivered, her breath catching. They broke apart, gasping, their breath mingling in the cold air. He looked at her, his eyes dark and questioning, checking for consent, for any sign of fear. She smiled, a small, weary but genuine smile, and whispered his name. It was all the confirmation he needed. He kissed her again, and this time there was no more hesitation. They explored with fingertips and sharp, indrawn breaths. He kissed her jaw, her throat, his lips finding the pulse that hammered there. She arched against him, her own hands mapping the hard planes of his shoulders. The tension coiled there. They found a dry, heavy tarp folded in the hull of an old boat, and he pulled them down, half falling onto the rough canvas. He was on his side, looking at her, the single flickering bulb casting stark shadows across his face. He brushed a stray, wet strand of hair from her forehead, his touch surprisingly gentle. Maris laid her palm flat against his chest, over his heart. She could feel the steady, reassuring beat. It was a comfort. It was an anchor in the storm. This was not a surrender. This was a choice, made by two people in the eye of the hurricane, with 20 minutes left to live. A sharp ping from the laptop shattered the moment. A message from Nix. Patrols, EPAG just changed their rotation. They're hitting the depot early. We're not just fighting Kincaid's men, we're fighting the law. Someone's inside. Ronan was on his feet in an instant, the warmth gone, replaced by the cold focus of a commander. He began checking a handgun. The plan has changed. It's too hot. Silas will take you to the Sensi Castor location. You wait for me there. Maris stood up. Zipping her jumpsuit, she walked over to him, stopping until he was forced to look at her. I already stepped into the kitchen, Ronan, she said, her voice clear and hard, echoing the promise he didn't know he'd made. I'll stand the fire with you. He searched her face, looking for weakness, for a way to change her mind. He found none. He only saw his own resolve reflected back. He nodded, a single, sharp motion. He handed her a Kevlar vest. Put this on. As they moved toward the door, the timer showing 19 minutes, Maris stopped him with a hand on his arm. Ronan, tonight, she said, her voice an iron vow. Nobody dies. He looked at her, a fleeting, grim smile touching his lips. Only if we're better than they are. The Delaware port was a city of steel giants, a labyrinth of stacked containers under the harsh glare of sodium-orange security lights. The rain had subsided to a cold, persistent drizzle. The digital clock on Nix's laptop, linked to their comms, read 17 minutes. Maris moved alone. She wore grease-stained mechanic's overalls, the faint, sharp smell of machine oil clinging to her, a scent she'd deliberately applied. Her hair was hidden under a knitted watch cap. She walked with the weary, defeated shuffle of someone pulling a double shift, a forged maintenance invoice clipped to a board in her hand. She approached the south gate, the entry point for the Larkspur Dawn's berth. Gonna be a long night, the guard muttered, barely glancing at her paperwork. Got a hydraulic leak on Crane 7? You're cleared. Always, Maris replied, her voice flat, not meeting his eyes. He waved her through. She was in. She kept to the shadows, moving toward the massive container ship. Her target, not the ship itself, but the customs checkpoint booth where the container's digital release was finalized. Simultaneously, on the water side, Ronan and Silas cut the engine of a small, dark, inflatable boat, drifting the last 100 yards on the river's current. They were aiming for the ship's stern, a blind spot beneath the loading deck. Cameras are analog, Silas whispered, patching a device into his laptop. Old system. They're not watching for digital ghosts. He activated the modulator on the security monitors in the main office. The feed from the stern camera didn't go black. It just dissolved into a soft, rolling wave of analog static, the kind of interference that looked like a technical glitch, not an intrusion. Nix, we are at the base. Ronan spoke into his throat mic. How much time? 14 minutes. Nix's voice came back, tight with stress. From the safe house. She watched her screen. I'm in their staging server. I can see the Larkspur Dawn manifest. I'm building the bridge. I just need Maris to plug in the drive. Maris reached the checkpoint booth. It was empty. The customs officer clearly taking an unscheduled break. She slipped inside. This was the nexus. She found the local server panel and slid the cloned USB drive into the port. A light on Nix's console flashed green. "I have the handshake." Nix breathed. "I'm pulling the data." "Oh, this is massive. This is everything." The lights on her modem began to blink with frantic speed. A Morse code prayer. Maris didn't celebrate. She looked down at the floor panel she'd almost tripped on. The screws were fresh. A wire, thin and black, ran from it, tucked under the molding. She followed it. It led to a small, pressure-activated plate under the steel floor. It wasn't a bomb meant to kill a person. It was a trigger. She pried the panel open with a screwdriver from her belt. Underneath was a compact device linked to a hydraulic trigger. It was aimed at the water. If the main server countdown reached 0, or if this plate was triggered, it would activate a thermite charge and simultaneously flood the container holds with seawater. Kincaid was not just deleting the data. He was planning to boil it and sink it. "Ronan?" Maris said into her mic, her voice low. "It's rigged. The whole pier is set to blow and flood. I'm on the trigger." "Get out of there," Ronan ordered. "No time. If I move, it might go. I have to disarm it. Wait." Before he could argue, a new set of headlights flooded the container yard. Not security pickups. 3 black SUVs official, bearing the seal of the Eastern Port Authority Task Group, rolled to a stop, cutting off Ronan's exfiltration route. The doors opened. Commander Keen Arbery stepped out, a man with a face like worn leather, flanked by a dozen agents. He raised a bullhorn. "Ronan!" His voice boomed, echoing off the steel walls. "It's been a long time since your confirmation. Boy, you're a long way from St. Dominic's." Ronan froze on the ship's ladder. Confirmation. Arbery had used his childhood name, a name no one outside his immediate family knew. This was not a random patrol. This was a message. This was Kincaid's purchased law. "What do you want?" "Keen," Ronan called back, stepping into the light, a signal for Silas to stay hidden. "This is a reconciliation, son," Arbery shouted, a false, friendly tone. "Mr. Kincaid is a reasonable man. He understands your grief. He's willing to let this all go. He just wants what you stole, the drive and the girl." Nix's voice was frantic in their ears. 8 minutes. The download is only at 40%. "The girl," Ronan stalled, projecting his voice. "She's just a waitress. She saw nothing." "She's a loose end. Ronan, you know the rules. Give us the witness and the data she stole, and you get to walk away. A clean slate. A return to the way things were." Maris listened, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her foster father, a mechanic who worked on freightliners, had taught her about hydraulics. It's just pressure. "Kid, find the bypass. Don't cut the wire. Just release the tension." Her fingers found the valve. It was delicate. If she turned it too fast, the pressure change would trip the sensor. Too slow, and the timer would beat her. Ronan was still talking, arguing logistics with Arbery, buying seconds. His voice a calm, steady baritone in the chaotic night. "And how do I know you'll honor that Kincaid's word isn't what it used to be?" As Ronan distracted Arbery, a new sound cut through the air. A high-pitched electronic tone. A massive video screen on the side of a warehouse, usually used for shipping announcements, flickered to life. Lazaro Kincaid's face appeared, 50 feet high. He was smiling. "Ronan? Ronan?" Kincaid's voice boomed over the yard's speaker system, silencing everyone. "You're negotiating with the help. You should be talking to me." His gaze seemed to scan the yard. "And tell your waitress. I'm so glad her mother is resting comfortably at St. Castor. Such a peaceful place. It would be a tragedy if there was a fire or a failure in their life support systems." Maris's blood went ice cold. Her hand slipped on the valve. The mechanism clicked. 5 minutes, Nix whispered. 60%. Ronan looked up at the massive, digital face of his enemy. He saw Maris frozen in the booth. He saw Arbery, his hand now on his weapon. He had no more cards to play. So he changed the game. He pulled his satellite phone from his jacket. "Nix, That package we prepared, the CED file. Send it. Ronan, that's a one-way street, Nix protested. Do it now. Doing it. Ronan turned back to Arbery, a cold, hard smile on his face. He held his phone up. You're too late, Keen. Across the internet, on a dozen public watchdog forums and secure drop sites, a file suddenly appeared. Citywide Ethics Directorate, Internal Audit. It contained the first round of payments, the falsified receipts, the direct, undeniable link between the city's agency and Orchid Ledger. Kincaid's smile faltered on the giant screen. Arbery's phone began to buzz. Then the phones of all his agents. The heliotrope ring was no longer a shadow. It was exposed. You're done, Lazaro, Ronan shouted, his voice raw. You want a war, you just got one. Under the cover of the sudden chaos, Maris took a steadying breath. She ignored Kincaid's face, ignored the timer. She focused on the machine. She turned the hydraulic valve, a quarter turn, bleeding the pressure with a faint, oily sigh. The trigger disengaged. I'm clear, she whispered. The pier is stable. Download at 90%, Nix yelled. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I have it. I have it all. The timer on Kincaid's bomb reached 0. The data was safe, but the war was not over. The digital timer on Kincaid's physical bomb had been neutralized by Maris, and the data wipe timer had been beaten by Nix. But Lazaro Kincaid's face, 50 feet high on the warehouse screen, contorted from shocked fury back into a cold, reptilian smile. The data is irrelevant when his amplified voice boomed, drowning out the sudden chorus of buzzing phones from Keen Arbery's men. You can't use it if you're dead, and you can't save everyone. His gaze, digital and immense, seemed to lock directly onto the customs booth. I still hold the Queen. Maris, your mother, St. Castor, 10 minutes. That's the new clock. Give me the master drive, or the hospice burns. Maris felt the blood drain from her face. This was the choice, the data in her hand, the proof that could stop heliotrope, save countless unknown people from being trafficked, exploited, and laundered, or her mother. Ronan, she whispered into the mic, her voice cracking. He means it. I know, Ronan's voice came back, tight with a rage she'd never heard before. It's your call, Maris. Whatever you choose, we live with it. She looked at the drive. She looked at the ship. She saw her mother's face, smiling at her over a cup of weak tea. Nix, Maris said, her voice shaking. Can you get me a line to St. Castor, to her room, now? That's suicide, Maris, Nix shot back. He'll be monitoring every signal. He's monitoring the facility, not her personal tablet. You said Talia's brother worked in their IT. There's a back door. Find it, please. A agonizing silence, filled only by the click of Nix's keyboard. I'm looking. I'm in. Bouncing the signal off 3 continents. He'll find it, but not for 2 minutes. Go. Maris's phone, still clutched in her hand, buzzed with a private video link. Her mother's face appeared, grainy and pale, woken from sleep. Marissa, her mother slurred, confused. Baby, what's wrong? There are alarms. People are shouting in the hall. Mama, Maris choked, the tears finally breaking free, hot and fast. Mama, listen, I'm in trouble. They want me to do something. If I don't, they're going to hurt you. Her mother's eyes, clouded by medication, suddenly sharpened. They focused on her daughter's face, on the grease, the tears, the Kevlar vest. She saw it all. Marissa Vega, she said, her voice suddenly strong, the voice that had raised her alone. You look at me. I have lived my life. I taught you how to clean a wound, how to set a table, how to stand up straight. I never taught you to kneel. But Mama, they'll... No, whatever they are asking, if it costs you who you are, you do not pay it. Do you hear me? Don't you dare pay with your soul, mija. I am already safe. I love you. The line went dead. Maris lowered the phone. Her hand was rock steady. The tears had stopped. She wiped her face with her greasy sleeve, leaving a dark streak. She looked across the yard, past the confused agents, to where Ronan stood on the ship's ladder. She gave a single, sharp shake of her head. No. Ronan's shoulders, which had been tense enough to snap, visibly relaxed. He understood. On the screen, Kincaid saw the silent exchange. "Wrong answer," he roared. "Arbery, take them now, burn the hospice." But Keen Arbery didn't move. He was staring at his phone, at the public links to the CED files. His name was there, linked to the transfers. He was the fall guy. "Commander," Silas's voice cut through the comms, cold and clear. "Ronan, Maris, listen, the intel from Talia, the insider wasn't EPTG, it was CED. They've been selling integrity to Kincaid to fund their own black budget. Arbery isn't the puppet master. He's just the puppet. He just found out he's been played." Ronan looked at Arbery. He saw a man watching his career, his pension, and his freedom evaporate. "Keen," Ronan shouted, stepping away from the ladder into the open. "He's lying to you. He's been lying to all of us. Check your phone. Check the transfer logs. CED set you up. They're making you take the fall for their corruption." Arbery looked at the data, then at Kincaid's silent, furious face on the screen, then at Ronan. He was a man trapped. Ronan turned his back on Arbery, a profound act of dismissal. He looked toward Maris as she stepped out of the customs booth. The drive clutched in her hand. "Maris," he said over the mic, his voice low, meant only for her. "You chose the light. I will push the darkness away from you, even if it means I lose everything I have." He raised his sat phone. "Nix, execute Plan C." "Ronan," Nix's voice was thin. "Plan C it's a burn order. It's everything." "Execute it. Burn the network. Cut them all loose." "What's Plan C?" Maris asked, moving to join him. "My organization," Ronan said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He was already making another call. "I'm dissolving half of my assets, cutting off contacts, safe houses, shipping lines. It's a firewall. Kincaid thinks he's fighting my father's empire. He's about to fight me, a man with nothing left to lose. I'm cutting off my own arm so the infection can't spread to you." He ended the call. It was done. He had just sacrificed 20 years of his life. "Silas," Ronan commanded, "the birds." On it, from the roof of the warehouse where Silas was perched, a new sound emerged, the high-pitched whine of a dozen cheap, commercial quad drones. They rose into the night sky, modified with high-intensity flares. They swarmed low over the container yard, a chaotic constellation of metal birds, blinding Kincaid's private guards. "What is that?" Arbery yelled, his men pointing weapons at the sky, confused. "That," Ronan said, "is our exit." Kincaid's men opened fire on the drones, mistaking them for an assault. The yard erupted into chaos. Keen Ronan shouted over the gunfire, "You have a choice. Stand with the man who just made you the most wanted man in the press, or stand down for 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes to get what I need, and I'll give you the man who set you up. Your call." Arbery looked at the chaos, at his buzzing phone, at Kincaid's silent, furious face. He lowered his weapon. 5 minutes, he growled. 5 minutes, then this entire yard is my jurisdiction. Get it done. "Nix, we're moving the container," Ronan ordered. "Silas, get to the main crane. We're pulling the Larkspur Dawn from the berth." "Moving it where?" Maris yelled over the noise. "The river. We're not just leaking the data. We're broadcasting it. We're forcing their hand." Ronan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the massive loading crane. Maris stumbled but kept up, her heart hammering. She stopped for a second, grabbing his jacket, forcing him to look at her. The yard was a mess of shouting, gunfire, and the whine of drones. "Ronan," she said, breathless, her grip like iron, "you're not dying tonight." He stopped. The chaos seemed to fade, compressed into a single, sharp point of focus, her. He looked at her covered in grease, her hair falling out of its cap, her eyes burning with a terrifying, beautiful fire. A genuine, unguarded smile flashed across his face, a brief, brilliant light in the darkness. "Only," he said, his voice rough, "if you keep looking at me like that." He pulled her toward the crane, The war for the city had just entered its final, desperate stage. The entire port was a symphony of chaos. Above them, Silas was a master puppeteer in the crane's cabin, the massive steel arm groaning in protest. He had hooked the Larkspur Dawn container, the one containing Nyx and her broadcast rig, lifting it free of the pier. But he wasn't loading it. He was wielding it. Two black, low-profile speedboats belonging to Heliotrope cut through the dark water of the Delaware, their engines screaming. They opened fire, automatic weapons spitting orange flashes at the crane. Silas swung the multi-ton container, a pendulum of solid steel, using it as a massive shield to block the incoming rounds. The bullets pinged uselessly off the corrugated sides, sounding like metallic hail. He was a conductor, and this was his masterpiece of industrial defiance. Ronan and Maris were on the deck of the Larkspur Dawn itself, the ship now untethered and drifting, caught in the crane's grip. "Nyx in status," Ronan yelled into his mic. "I'm broadcasting." Nyx's voice was thin, terrified. "But Kincaid's fighting back. Oh no, he's triggered a system lockdown. The cabin door, it's sealed. I can't get out." Maris looked at the container hanging 20 feet above the deck. Nyx was trapped in a steel box, and Kincaid's men were trying to turn it into a coffin. "Ronan, cover me," Maris yelled. She didn't wait. She grabbed a cargo hook and rope, scaled the side of a nearby container stack, and launched herself, swinging through the air to land hard on top of the container Silas was holding. The cabin door was reinforced steel, its electronic lock dead, but the hinges were external. Maris pulled a heavy-duty lug wrench from the mechanic's belt she still wore. She jammed it into the hinge, putting her entire body weight into it, using the tool as a lever. The steel groaned, bent but held. "It's not enough," she shouted. She looped a heavy cargo strap around the wrench, bracing her feet against a weld seam. She was not a soldier, but she had the strength of a survivor, a raw, desperate power born of endless double shifts. She pulled, her muscles screaming, the sinews in her neck standing out. With a sound like a gunshot, the top hinge snapped, the door buckled, opened just enough. Down on the deck, Ronan was not alone. A man had emerged from the ship's hold, Vic Moreau, Kincaid's chief enforcer, a man with dead eyes and a reputation for silent efficiency. "The boss wants the girl," Vic said, his voice flat. He held a knife, not a gun. The deck was slick with river spray and the residual rain. It was not a place for finesse. As Vic lunged, Ronan didn't meet the blade. He slipped, using the wet steel to his advantage. Sliding past the attack, it was a fight of balance and leverage. Ronan kicked at Vic's knee, not to break it, but to unbalance him. Vic staggered, recovering quickly, his knife tracing a silver arc. Ronan grabbed a heavy mooring rope, swinging it like a bludgeon, forcing Vic to backpedal. It was a raw, clumsy, desperate brawl. Above them, Maris, having wedged the door open, saw the new threat. The media wasn't coming. Kincaid was likely running a signal jammer. She scrambled into the ship's bridge. She knew what to do. Every ship had them. She found the flare gun. She ran to the railing, aimed it high, and fired. A single, brilliant white star exploded against the night sky, a universal signal of distress. A minute later, a new sound joined the chorus, the high-pitched whine of multiple rotors. The geofence tag Nyx had attached to the data leak had worked. News drones, drawn by the public data drop and now the visual signal, swarmed the scene. "No witnesses," Kincaid's voice shrieked, no longer on the main screen, but from a speaker on one of the speedboats. On the pier, a series of decoy containers exploded, a secondary trap. The blast was concussive, designed to create a wall of smoke and fire to obscure the media's view. Flames licked up the side of the Larkspur Dawn. "Maris, the fire!" Ronan yelled, dodging another knife thrust from Vic. Maris saw the ship's emergency fire suppression system. She smashed the glass and activated the foam. A thick white blanket of suppressant began to pour onto the deck, looking like snow, hissing as it hit the flames, coating the steel and making the footing even more treacherous. From the river, Keen Arbery watched. He saw the explosions. He saw the white flare. He saw his own men, confused. and Kincaid's men firing with lethal intent. He looked at the CED order in his hand, now illuminated by the fires. He tore it in half. All EPTG units, Arbery commanded over his own radio. We have an active shooter situation and a vessel fire. Engage, search and rescue, prioritize civilian life. His boats, no longer hesitant, surged forward. Kincaid was losing. His phone, routed to Maris's device, rang in her pocket. She answered, the sound of the battle roaring around her. Last chance, Lazaro Kincaid's voice snarled, desperate. My men are at St. Castor. Shoot him. Shoot Ronan Viscari. Let my men see it. Let the drones see it. Do it, or your mother burns in her bed. Maris looked across the chaotic deck. She saw Ronan, slick with foam, fighting for his life, fighting for her. She saw the media drones. She saw Arbery's boats approaching, lights flashing. She saw the truth. She held the phone up. Then, with a final, defiant look toward Kincaid's speedboat, she threw it into the dark, churning water of the Delaware. A shot cracked through the air, not from Vic, from a sniper on the second boat. Ronan grunted, a sharp exhalation of breath. He didn't fall, but he stumbled. Vic Moreau, seeing his opening, lunged, but Ronan, even wounded, was faster. He sidestepped, and Vic, blinded by the foam and his own momentum, slid past him, tumbling over the railing and into the river. Ronan leaned against a bulkhead, his hand pressed to his side. Dark blood, almost black in the chemical light, pulsed between his fingers. Ronan, Maris screamed. She ran, sliding through the foam, grabbing him before he could fall. You're hit. Just grazed. He lied, his face pale, his teeth gritted. She ignored him, pulling him with a strength she didn't know she possessed, half carrying, half dragging him into the warmth and pounding noise of the engine room. She slammed the heavy steel door shut, plunging them into a world of steam and thrumming pistons. She pushed him down onto a metal catwalk. Don't move! She ripped the first aid kit from her belt, her hands sure, no longer shaking. She tore open his shirt. It was a deep graze along his ribs, bleeding heavily. She grabbed a pressure bandage and pressed it hard against the wound. He hissed, his back arching, but he didn't fight her. He just watched her. His eyes, dark and wide with pain and shock, were not looking at his wound. They were fixed on her face, on her determination, on the grease and foam, on the absolute terrifying certainty in her gaze. He was looking at her as if he had never seen another person before, as if she were the first light he had seen after a lifetime in the dark. A crackle came over her comms. Nix. The data is at 98%. The hacker's voice was frantic. The broadcast is stable. Just hold on. 120 seconds. We just have to live for 120 seconds. The engine room was a steel heart, hot and pounding. Steam hissed from the pistons, mixing with the cold spray of the river that found its way through a leaking porthole. Outside, the world was a cacophony of sirens, shouting, and the persistent heavy thrum of the fire suppression foam. Red and blue lights from Arbery's approaching boats sliced through the grime on the glass, painting the cabin in flashes of panic. Ronan was pale, a sheen of cold sweat mixing with the heat of the room. Maris kept her hands locked on the pressure bandage, her entire body braced against the thrumming of the ship's engines. 90 seconds, she whispered, her voice hoarse, repeating the countdown from Nix's comm. She was counting for him. 89, 88. He watched her, his gaze unwavering, his breath coming in shallow, painful gasps. The pain was radiating, but it was not the wound that held his focus. It was her face, streaked with grease and foam, her eyes fierce and terrified and absolutely steady. He lifted his hand, the one she had bandaged in the boatyard, and his fingers found her jaw. She leaned into his touch, a silent, mutual surrender. They met in the middle, their foreheads touching, pressing together. For a single, shared second, the world fell away. There was only the smell of hot oil, river water, and the metallic tang of his blood. Their breaths mingled, a shared, desperate gasp for air in the suffocating heat. Maris lifted her head, just an inch. She looked at his lips, chapped and pale. She kissed him. It was not the deep, exploring kiss of the boatyard. It was a seal. It was short, firm, and desperate. A transfer of life, a promise pressed into his skin. I am here. Stay. He shuddered, his eyes closing. His voice was a rasp, shredded by pain. Mara, if I don't... No, she cut him off, her voice a low, iron command that vibrated through the steel room. You are not dying tonight. Why? He whispered, his eyes opening, confused by her certainty. This is... Because you have to be there, she said, the words tumbling out, a frantic confession. I have this plan, a food truck, a silver one, down by the Ben Franklin Bridge, Riverline pies. I'd hire people from the halfway houses, single moms who need a second chance, ex-cons who just need someone to trust them with the register. She was crying now, the tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her face. I'll make apple and cherry and you have to be there to try the first one. You have to live. Ronan, you don't get to leave. I won't let you. He stared at her, this impossible woman who had walked into his life with a cup of coffee and an antidote. He saw it the pie truck, the silver, the second chances. He saw a future he had never believed he was allowed to have. A sharp crackle from her comm. 30 seconds, Nick screamed. He's throwing everything at me, a final firewall. It was followed by Silas's roar. Secondary charges. The manifest shows secondary charges. The whole ship is wired, Kincaid scuttling her jump now. The words had barely registered when the heavy steel door of the engine room exploded inward, torn from its hinges. 2 of Kincaid's men, their faces masks of rage, loyalty overriding their survival, stormed in, weapons raised. Ronan moved. It was not a thought, it was an instinct. Fueled by her words, by the vision of a pie truck. He roared. He shoved Maris behind the solid block of the main engine, standing between her and the gunmen, his body a shield. His own weapon was in his hand. He fired. He didn't aim for center mass. He didn't aim for the head. He remembered her words, her arguments, her belief in the light. His first shot hit the handgun of the lead man, the weapon exploding from his grasp in a spray of sparks. The second man lunged. Ronan shot him in the knee. The man collapsed, screaming, a wound of agony, but not of death. He was fighting her way. 10 seconds, Nix shrieked. The first man, unarmed, charged, pulling a knife. 4, 3, 2... Ronan met the charge, disarming him with a brutal efficiency, a twist of the wrist that broke the man's arm but saved his life. 100% Nix's voice was a triumphant, sobbing scream. The broadcast is complete. It's on 10 public nodes. It's mirrored. It's gone. He can't stop it. He can't ever stop it. A single, profound second of silence. The engine thrummed. The sirens wailed. They had won. Lazaro Kincaid, on his speedboat, his monitors filled with the data he could no longer contain, his network exposed, his name ruined, made his final move. He hit the detonator. It was not an explosion, it was an execution. The Larkspur Dawn groaned, a deep, mortal sound, as the secondary charges deep in its hull ignited. The deck plates above them split open. The main engine tore free from its mountings. A wall of fire, bright orange and roaring, erupted through the bulkhead, a dragon's mouth opening to swallow them whole. There was no time to run. Ronan, his side screaming, grabbed Maris. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest, shielding her with his body. "Hold your breath," he roared. He did not run from the fire. He ran at it. He lunged, a desperate, impossible leap, aiming for the new, jagged opening in the ship's side. They flew through the edge of the fire, the heat searing their clothes, and into the cold, black night. They fell, tumbling 20 feet into the churning, foam-choked water of the Delaware. The impact was a brutal, cold slap, but they did not sink. A bright orange disc, an auto-inflating life raft, thrown by Silas seconds before the blast bobbed on the surface, a beacon in the chaos. Ronan used the last of his strength to shove Maris onto the slick vinyl. He tried to follow, but his body gave out. His hand slipped, and he went limp, his face turning toward the water. "No!" Maris screamed. She grabbed the front of his jacket, hauling him with a desperate, adrenaline-fueled strength, rolling his dead weight onto the raft. He was unconscious, his face ashen, the water around his side stained a dark, terrifying crimson. The Larkspur dawn was sinking, its stern rising to the sky, a monument of fire. Arbery's boats were closing in. Maris looked at Ronan's still face. She ripped off the tattered makeshift EMT apron. "No," she whispered. She locked her hands together, placing the heel of her palm on his sternum. Just as she had been taught, she pushed, hard, leaning her whole weight into it. 1, and 2, and 3. She was crying, gasping, but a wild, ragged laugh tore from her throat, a sound of pure, hysterical defiance. "I told you," she sobbed, pushing again. "You don't get to die tonight, Mafia Boss. You hear me? You don't get to die." The dawn broke over a city in chaos, but it was the chaos of cleansing fire. The data Nix had broadcast from the Larkspur dawn was a virus in the city's corrupt systems. By 6 a.m., it was the only story. The complex web of transfers from Orchid Ledger to the citywide ethics directorate, and from them to shell companies owned by EPTG officials, was laid bare for the public. The commissioner of the CED was led from his home in handcuffs before the sun had fully risen. Commander Keen Arbery, true to his word, had walked into the nearest federal building, suspended his own badge, and provided testimony that corroborated every piece of Nix's data. By noon, St. Castor Hospice, facing an immediate federal investigation, released Maris's mother, citing a sudden and miraculous recovery. She was safe, unaware of the war that had been fought for her. Lazaro Kincaid had vanished. His face was on every screen, but the man himself had dissolved back into the digital shadows, his empire shattered, his name a curse. Ronan Vascari did not go to a private clinic. He was taken to North Ferry General, a public hospital filled with the noise and smell of the city. He refused a private room, refused the guards his organization tried to send. He lay against the thin pillows, the bullet wound in his side stitched and clean, and for the first time in his life, he did not hide. He chose to face the light. Maris, too, refused to hide. The federal agents offered her witness protection, a new name, a new town, a life free from her past. She politely declined. She liked her name. She liked her city. 3 weeks later, in the crisp November air, a gleaming silver food truck parked by the foot of the Benjamin Franklin Bridge. The sign, painted in warm blue, read Riverline Pies, and in small script below, "If you want a new start, come in." He came on a Tuesday. Ronan looked thinner, paler, the long, dark overcoat hiding the bandages that still wrapped his ribs. He walked with a slight limp, his body still healing. He just stood for a moment watching her hand a hot pie to a construction worker, the smell of cinnamon and baked apples cutting through the cold river air. When the customer left, he stepped up to the window. He didn't order. He simply placed a set of heavy, old-fashioned keys on the steel counter. "It's a warehouse, over in Fishtown," he said, his voice quiet. "The deed is clean. I'm turning it over to the city, to you, for your vocational center." Maris looked at the keys, then at his face. This is blood money, Ronan." "No," he said. "It was my father's. It's time it built something, instead of breaking it." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. Not his secure one, but a burner. A single text from an unknown number. It was a picture of the bridge above them, choked with 5 p.m. traffic. And one line, "Heliotrope sends its regards, a parting gift." Ronan's face went hard, the final, spiteful act of a ghost. "It's a bomb," he said, his voice flat. He turned. "This one's mine. Maris, this isn't your fight." "Where are you going?" "To the bridge, alone." Maris moved so fast he didn't have time to react. She untied the clean white apron from her own waist. She stepped out of the truck, walked right up to him, and, standing on her toes, tied it around his waist, over his expensive coat. "You are not dying tonight, Mafia Boss," she said, her voice low and fierce. She then untied her own apron, the one she had just put on him, and let it drop to the pavement. "I'm going with you." They ran, not to the police, but to the pedestrian walkway. The bridge was a parking lot, horns blaring. "It'll be 2 devices," Ronan said, his eyes scanning the massive structure. "A decoy to draw the bomb squad, and the real one." They found the decoy easily, a large military-style case zip-tied to a girder, a red light blinking obviously. "Too loud," Maris said. "He's arrogant, not stupid." She looked up, scanning the beams, the rivets, the infrastructure. Her eyes landed on a large green highway sign, I-95 South. Something was wrong. The font, the letter S, was mounted just slightly lower than the other letters, its alignment off by a fraction of an inch. She remembered Talia, the deaf administrator, and her unique, backward way of stacking code, a human error. "There," Maris pointed, scrambling up a maintenance ladder. Behind the sign, he used an amateur. They mounted the housing backward. Ronan followed her. Tucked behind the S was a small, black box. The digital timer read 40 seconds. "I can't reach it," Ronan said, the abutment just out of his grasp. "Then lift me," she commanded. He laced his fingers, a human stirrup, and boosted her up. She balanced precariously on the narrow steel beam. His hands, braced against her legs, were shaking. He wasn't afraid of the bomb. He was terrified of losing her. 30 seconds. She ripped the cover off. It was a complex mess, but the trigger was a pressure-sensitive pin. "If I cut the wire, the pin drops, it completes the circuit. I need a wedge, something non-conductive to stop the pin." She had nothing. He had nothing. 20 seconds. Maris felt her pocket. Her fingers brushed metal, the tongs she used to pull pies from the oven. "Ronan," she called down, "the charge is wired to the steel frame. It's using the bridge as a ground." He looked around, desperate. Nothing. He slapped the pockets of the apron she had tied on him. His fingers hit something flat and metal. The dough cutter. 10 seconds. "Ground it," Maris yelled. Ronan slammed the sharp edge of the dough cutter into the soft asphalt of the walkway and grabbed the primary charge wire, forcing the current into the ground. Above him, Maris jammed the thin, metal tip of the pie tongs into the trigger assembly, wedging the pin just as her fingers, slick with sweat, cut the wire. The timer stopped. 0. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant horns and the wind off the river. 2 simple tools from a pie truck had just saved a city. The flashing lights converged. Police, Arbery, his face grim. Ronan helped Maris down from the beam. He looked at the approaching officers, and his instinct, old and deep, screamed at him to run. He took a step toward the railing, toward the shadows. Maris grabbed his hand. Her grip was iron. "Stay," she said. "Maris, they'll—" "Stay." She turned him, forcing him to face the lights, to face the consequences. "We share the responsibility. We share the future. We're done running." He looked at her hand holding his. He took a deep breath, the first truly free breath of his life, and he did not run. He walked past Arbery, past the officers, straight toward the media trucks that had followed the bomb squad. Microphones were shoved in his face. Ronan Vascari, his side aching, his hands stained with traces of flour, stepped into the light. "My name is Ronan Vascari," he said, his voice clear. He told them everything. He confessed to his family's past. He provided the final, unredacted evidence against Kincaid's remaining network. He announced he was accepting a federal deal, one that ensured the protection of every witness, and the establishment of a community recovery fund built from the assets of his dissolved organization. When it was over, he pushed through the shouting reporters. He walked back to Maris, who was standing by the truck. He looked at her, and a slow, rare smile touched his lips, one that finally, truly reached his eyes. "Tonight," he said, taking her hand, "I'm alive because of us. The shot pulled back, leaving them there, illuminated by the flashing emergency lights and the warm, bright glow of the Riverline Pies truck. The air smelled of the cold river, and of warm cinnamon, and of two people, finally free, living within the limits they had chosen together. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to connect with you, so please comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from. Please subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give it a huge boost by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.